anger is the one feeling that most of us disassociate from, and it does store in our bodies for that reason. Freud said it really well. He was the first to say it, and I'll repeat it. He said, depression is anger turned inward. And I will augment that and say, anxiety is also anger turned inward. Panic is also anger turned inward. Mania is anger turned inward.
Why are we so angry?
So many therapists are just treating symptoms, not the core root problem. Now that anger isn't stuck inside you anymore, just having someone validate it, you're not alone in your anger. What's shareable is bearable. So now that anger is literally released from your body. All of the listeners are going to relate to this at some level.
What happens when we don't express our emotions?
So I like to say that even though our emotions are invisible, they are as real, and even I believe more real than other things. So, our feelings are more real than this laptop that I'm sitting here recording this on. And they don't just dissipate into the ether. I believe they store away in our bodies, especially anger. That's the one that most people kind of suppress, either because they're unaware of their anger, um, or they don't feel entitled to be angry, or they've been conditioned as a child, anger's bad, it's evil. Maybe they've witnessed that anger is always explosive, and so they only associate anger with like violence or verbal violence, or some kind of disruptive type of behavior. And so most of us tend to dissociate from our anger, and it stagnates in our bodies. It doesn't go away. I mean, over decades, it does not go away. And over time, it can, I believe, cause autoimmune conditions. I think a lot of autoimmune conditions are caused by stagnant anger hanging out in our bodies. I didn't used to believe that. My first career, my first master's degree is in nutrition. And I really believe that if we just ate the right diet and lived the right lifestyle, there'd be no autoimmune disorders, for example. But now I'm actually on the other side of the spectrum, and it took me a while to get there. But my work as a therapist is kind of what got me there. It kind of took seeing to believing for me. I think a lot of headaches, migraines, people don't know why they come. Well, I think they're from suppressed anger. I absolutely see in my clients how they are triggered by things that they are dissociating from that are causing anger, just prior to the migraine. GI issues like stomach aches. Yeah, and even like sleep issues. I myself struggled with insomnia for, this is going to age me, and I have no problem with that. I'm in my 50s. For about 30 years, I struggled with insomnia, off and on, but a lot of on. Um, and looking back now, I absolutely, without a doubt, know it was due to my own suppressed anger. And, with that anger for me, and I think for a lot of us, it was regarding my relationship with my father and just kind of not channeling my anger with him in a healthy way, like which would mean boundaries with him. And I think the anger that I was suppressing or that was affecting me, causing the insomnia, wasn't anger at my father. It was anger at me for betraying myself in relationship with him for 30 years. And I think that's what that was all about. And I see that with a lot of other people, with a lot of my clients, where they will have sleep issues, again, gut issues, migraines, headaches, and autoimmune. And I really believe it's more our anger at ourselves for betraying ourselves at the person we are actually chronically angry at, that we are not really wanting to entertain.
So much to unpack in there. I have a theory that I'm going to ask you about your father first, but I do want to circle back about the nutrition as how it's linked to emotions, because I have a theory about that and I want to get your opinion. First of all, your father, you saw your anger reflected in him. How did that evolve, or how did you release that? I'm assuming that you have now release that or that it's no longer a factor for you. So
Mhm.
what happened with the anger with your father?
Well, so what I did, and I think this all of the listeners are going to relate to this at some level, is I dissociated from my anger at my father. So I refused to be honest with myself and recognize how much of a monster he was. I just kind of overlooked a lot of things because no one's 100% bad. And when it's a parent, we at any age are absolutely desperate to finally win that parent's approval, acceptance, love, recognition, to put a smile on their face. And I was willing to overlook, and I was overlooking. I kind of came to the ratio. I told him at one point, you're 80% monster. 20% of you is lovely, but I can't overlook the 80% anymore. Um, but I was overlooking the 80% for 30 years, like I mentioned. And so I believe that in doing so, in continuing to act as if everything was great and he was a great father and we have a great relationship, and continuing to seek his approval and seek his love and, win that for myself, I was betraying myself. And so that anger of me betraying myself was what was affecting me with my sleep. And I have seen this with a lot of other people.
Yes, I imagine so because I can relate with this so much already. So I imagine this is hitting home for the listeners. As far as emotions and nutrition, I have a theory where if you are eating a whole food, plant-based maybe diet, basically you're avoiding a lot of processed junk. That a lot
Yes.
of emotions are easier to feel and to let go of and to basically feel through, and they don't get as trapped and stored in the body as easily because we're not eating those foods as comfort foods and um, kind of shoving that down to numb ourselves or to cope with that uncomfortable feeling of the emotion, because you can't really overeat too much on whole foods. Do you think that that's
Yeah.
everything there?
Well, it's funny because I am whole foods plant based, and that is my line of nutrition. And again, I used to totally believe that as well. Um, but when I struggled with insomnia for those 30 years, I was plant based whole foods. I'm like super healthy. When I fell into my very, very steep depressive episode that I can also talk more about, I was plant based whole foods the whole time. I was exercising all the time. Like I would go to a therapist for help and they'd be like, "Well, you need to do, a CBT therapist will tell you you need to work on your diet and your exercise and do all these things." I'm like, "I'm already doing that. I'm still hardly functioning in any other regard." So, I don't think it doesn't help, but I just don't think it's enough if we're still betraying ourselves.
Okay, I
It's
agree.
it's it's almost like it's one aspect of our lives we're not betraying ourselves, is how we're nurturing ourselves so well, and that is like that's significant. But if we're betraying ourselves in other ways by staying in a relationship with a monster, for example, or like not having boundaries with people, I don't know, it's not enough in my book.
Mm. Okay, so it's kind of like another way that we can be like, "No, look, I'm really healthy. Look at how good I eat. Look at me exercising. I don't
Mhm.
have to deal with these emotions that I know are there, but I'm not gonna look at them or deal with them because I'm really healthy." But really, you're not under because underlying that is those emotions that you're just not dealing with.
Yeah, so we need to learn to self nurture in the same way in every arena of our life. So with like eating a whole foods plant-based diet, that is a way of loving ourselves and nurturing ourselves that is so good, but we need to do that in every arena in our relationships. So, we talked about anger. Anger is the one feeling that most of us disassociate from, and it does store in our bodies for that reason. And anger isn't an intrapersonal problem. Like, that's why I have a problem with a lot of therapists. I became a therapist because I couldn't find a good therapist, actually. So, true story. But uh, they will look at it as like, oh, Jessica, you have some anger issues we need to work on. Okay, so let's work on deep breathing. Let's work on, going outside, going for a walk. That's that is treating anger as if it were an intra personal issue, that it's just a you issue. It's just a Jessica issue. That is never, we never, how could that even exist? Anger only is fueled by relationships. It's only catalyzed in relationship. It's not intrapersonal, it's interpersonal. And so we have to see it as such. And we have, so I view anger as is a warning light, like on the dashboard of our car saying, hey, check the engine. Something is wrong. And so we need to check and bring about resolution to the problem that is causing it to go off, to warn us. And that's a good thing. It's always a good thing. We don't look at the 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 light of our dashboard and go, oh, that's so annoying, I'm just going to turn it off. No, we hopefully heed it because we know it's really telling us something important. And so I don't see having anger as wrong or bad, even though a lot of us were conditioned to believe, don't be angry, that's wrong. And maybe more women than men, we could talk about that too, for sure. But it's a good thing. It's there to give us information. It's there to give us wisdom. It's there to give us insight into something needs to be resolved. And we do that with boundaries, with assertive speech, and accountability. So we don't have to blow up. We don't have to yell. We don't have to do any of that. We can just say, hey, Jessica, um, this isn't working for me. Or, hey, that's not okay.
I like how you're sharing what to do when we feel that as far as boundaries and the way that we speak. But what if someone feels anger right now? So their warning light is going off. What can they do in this moment?
As they're listening to us, you mean? Or,
Just not right now listening to this, but let's say something happens
oh,
their day
okay.
to day and now they're angry. What can they do in that moment?
Okay. So it really depends what the anger is about. So, when you say that, I'm imagining like, there's a lot of us who are so hard on ourselves and we get angry at ourselves. We have unrealistic expectations of ourselves. So if I I'm washing the dishes and like I break a dish, some people get really angry at themselves. They have zero tolerance for mistakes or failures. And that's a big thing. So maybe that's the reason, right? And in that case, we relate to ourselves, we kind of parent ourselves, if you will, as we were parented. And so my goal as a therapist, and why I have my podcast for people who are not ever going to be my direct clients, to just kind of get this wisdom out there for the general population, is ultimately the goal is to help us relate to ourselves with kindness, with compassion, with grace, to unlearn the way we learned to relate to ourselves from our own early childhood. So to get to the place, well, so with someone who's super hard on themselves and they break a dish and they're like so angry, it's really to help them go, oh, wow, I learned to relate to little Bronwyn because of how little Bronwyn was parented by her mother. And that's really sick. Like, I really don't want to be like my mother in that way, but yet I'm relating to little Bronwyn right now with these unrealistic expectations of her to be some kind of robot who never makes mistakes and always does everything perfectly. Oh, I need to unlearn that. And so it's really me developing a relationship with little Bronwyn and saying, you know what? I'm so sorry, little Bronwyn. Like, I have really neglected you. I have really shamed you. I have really been judgmental towards you. I have really parented you just like our mother parented us. And you know what? Starting today, it's a new day. And I ask for your forgiveness. And I give you permission to be human. And you know what? Mistakes are great because they teach us things and we learn. failure is great too. And I give you permission to be human and to be messy and to learn as we go, because life is a learning by doing kind of situation. And I'm going to relate to you differently. I'm going to give you that room, that space, that love that's unconditional, because your worth and value aren't from what you do or your output. It's who you are inside. And I see, little Bronwyn, that you are precious to me. And you were precious the day you were born. And you will be precious the day you die. And you've already won my approval, just who you are inside. And so now, little Bronwyn, we are free because you have my approval, my unconditional approval, and I'm never going to abandon you. We are free to disappoint the hell out of everyone else.
You mentioned you had a depression or a depressive episode. You
Mhm.
mind sharing more about that?
Yeah, I had a really, really severe depressive episode to the point where I was involuntarily vomiting at random times. Um, so I'd be driving on the freeway and just vomit in my lap. I couldn't pull over, just it would just come up and out. That would happen when I was walking down the street as well, and it was humiliating. Um, and I did not know that depression could do that to someone's body. Like I knew I was depressed, but I was like, I thought I was going crazy. Um, so I went to a therapist and I went to multiple therapists. And each time, this is back when it was in person, each time I remember sitting there and thinking to myself, I'm hardly functioning right now, but I'm pretty sure I would still make a better therapist to me than this person is. It was just so bad. It was so bad for so many reasons, and I could share those more too. But I never found someone who I felt like really was a mirror for me, because that's what a good therapist is. They're a mirror. They reflect you back to you, and they give you a paradigm, a framework to understand yourself. And you're also understand yourself as you're speaking, because you're finally able to speak and no one's really interrupting you for like 45 minutes, hopefully. And while you're speaking, you're like, oh, now that I say that, I'm realizing, and so part of it, that insight is coming as you're speaking and as you're feeling attuned to, heard, and listened to, and like someone cares. And then they're like reflecting back to you, wow, Bronwyn, there's like this pattern. Have you noticed this pattern? Or I can see how this might be related to this. And so they're that mirror for you, giving you that reflection to give you insight and self-awareness. But I never found that. And so part of my recovery for that particular depressive episode, there were more to come. But for that one, it was going back to school, getting another master's in counseling psychology, and then working towards becoming a licensed therapist.
Wow. Okay. So you had to basically self teach.
Yeah, I mean, really. So school gives you, you know, I have two masters, so I can say school gives us the principles, and it gives us like, oh, there's all these different therapeutic, modalities. There's all these different theories, and you're kind of supposed to like pick which one you want to learn. So, which is kind of confusing. I mean, it is confusing. Um, but they give you that. They kind of give you like that foundation, and then, but real life is where you actually learn what works, which of those theories actually has any merit to it, which work, which don't, which modalities work, which modalities don't. And so my own struggles, this was my second career, and like I said, I'm in my 50s now. My own experience has given me the insight, to be able to help my clients. And that's really, again, what I'm trying to get out to the general public as well on my podcast. But my depressive episodes, looking back, I had really three that were severe over 10 years. And each one of those was the result of suppressed anger. And so Freud said it really well. He was the first to say it, and I'll repeat it. He said, depression is anger turned inward. And I will augment that and say, anxiety is also anger turned inward. Panic is also anger turned inward. Mania is anger turned inward. Psychosis, all of those things are anger turned inward.
Gosh, why are we so angry? Our emotions in general pass down through generations through our genes, through our bloodline? Do we inherit those when they're not let go from the people before us?
No, it looks very genetic because we see patterns within family systems, of course. It appears genetic, but no, it's really because, if your mom was, had borderline personality disorder, it's going to affect you. Of course it will, right? So it looks genetic, but it's not. Um I wouldn't say that we are so angry as people. I would say the problem isn't that we're angry. The problem is we're dissociating from our anger. So, if I have a healthy relationship with my anger, then I'm going to say, "Hey, Jessica, we were scheduled to meet at 9 this morning and you didn't come on till 9:18 and I didn't hear from you. And that's not okay." Right? That's just me expressing my anger. That's actually me connecting to my anger and channeling it out of my body in real time, not suppressing it, not disassociating it for 10, you know, repetitions until, 6 months from now. Now I'm exploding at you and it seems like it's just coming out all of a sudden, but it's really that I've overlooked you doing this for so long. So it's really not that we're angry. The problem is we don't have a healthy relationship with our anger. And a healthy relationship with our anger is really having a healthy relationship with ourself, our inner child. It's all the same.
Why do you think many traditional therapies and medications fail to effectively treat depression and anxiety?
Yeah. So I would say, as far as medications go, it's just managing symptoms. I mean, that's all it's doing. So if you came to me and had bipolar disorder, and I said, okay, well, let's work on managing, your mania. Are you going to sleep? We need to go to sleep every night at the same time. Are you getting enough sunlight? I mean, those aren't bad things, but are they treating the root problem? No, they're managing the symptom. The root problem of your mania is the suppressed anger that you're not being responsible for. You're not channeling that anger at your mom who keeps, you know, um, saying one thing and doing another over and over and over. You're not channeling your anger out with your mom and saying, "Hey, mom, you keep this up and this is not happening. Like this, I can't continue this. This is untenable. You're not treating me with any respect." So if you were to do that, that would address the root problem of, let's say, the mania, right? But if you're just getting medication, that's all going to just treat the symptoms of the mania. It's not going to get to the root core problem and address it. And then the therapies are pretty much a lot very similar to medication, where so many therapists are just treating symptoms, not the core root problem.
Hmm. Can you share an example of someone you worked with who had a bad relationship with someone due to anger, and then once they started implementing boundaries and not disassociating anymore, how that relationship changed?
Yeah, I have a pretty extreme one actually. So I had a client with psychosis, and psychosis, it's a strong word. We don't, I think in our culture we react to it like, wow, psychotic, someone's psychotic. And I think we throw that word around, but by definition, psychosis just means someone is having either hallucinations or delusional thoughts. So hallucinations, they can be auditory, they can be visual, and or delusional thoughts. Okay, so it really depends on that particular person. But this client was having hallucinations, not delusions. And they were pretty intense and they were very, very frightening for her. And she was on so many meds. I mean, so many meds. I mean, she was on meds for the other meds, to treat the symptoms of the other, the Um, so anyway, she came to me and I'm like, oh my God, your mom is a total monster. And she's like, wait, what? I'm the problem. I'm like, no, it sounds like she's the problem. The problem is that why is she still in your life? Like, that's the problem. And over time, it it took her a while to really unlearn that it would be make her a bad daughter for separating from her mother, and she really had to unlearn a lot of things because honestly, a lot of the best people are the scapegoat in the family where everyone's like, oh, she's the problem. She's the one with the mental issues. She's the one who like can't get it together. Um, but those are the monsters saying that, the ones who are exhibiting the monster behavior. So she had to really start seeing, okay, I'm actually the one with empathy in this family. I'm the one with a conscience, which makes me not a monster. Someone without a conscience, without empathy is a monster in my book. That's not a human. And so she had to start like kind of reframing everything. But over time, she was able to completely cut off her mom and her family. And the minute she did, her psychosis went away. And it has ever since. And it's been a long time now. And she's able to wean off all her meds.
Really? So
Mhm.
you would recommend just completely cutting the people out of your life versus, I mean, is there another way to kind of mend the relationship?
It depends. So I can talk about my father, with him, when I realized finally, like, how monstrous he is, I just sent him an email and I think it's really important for all of us to document. So I have like a lot of Google Docs, in other words, of like documented actual lived experiences with him. These are not like biased. These are just like real things that happened since my childhood till today, where I just had to document for myself because if we don't do that, our memories will forget. They'll be like, "Oh, but he's really actually just a sweet old man who doesn't know better." So whenever I start to play tricks on myself and disassociate from reality of who he really was, I would go back to my Google Doc and be like, "Oh my God, what a monster. I can't believe he did that to me at 7, 8, and just like up till today." And then I'd start seeing these patterns, seeing that actually he's never changed. He's never changed. Like his relationship to me is exactly the same. It's different today because I'm not vulnerable. I don't need him to be my primary caregiver anymore, but it's still there. Like his heart is still exactly the same. So again, no empathy, not much conscience, those things. His heart is still the same. And so when I started kind of going through my Google Doc to remind me to live in reality, to not live in his delusional construct, I started getting angry and staying angry. And that anger saved me. It saved me. And that anger allowed me to write him several emails where I documented some of those actual lived experiences. And I said, hey, you know what? Here's the thing. This is what happened you keep saying, "Oh, it was a long time ago." You keep saying that, but it's still happening. And there's never been any ownership on your end. There's never been any apology. There has never been an admission and like a willingness to become a safe person. And unless there is or are those things, I can't be around you anymore because you're not a safe person. And I can't do that. So, you want to be in my life? These are the terms. And if you go by those terms, I would love to have you in my life. I really would. I really would because we're both missing out. But I just can't do it unless you meet my terms. And he has refused to meet those terms. It's been almost a year and he has absolutely refused to meet those terms. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess you're even more of a monster than I thought. I thought you were 80%. Now I'm kind of thinking you're 100 because what kind of father, I'm his only child. What kind of father like would prioritize his own little ego over apologizing to his daughter to have a relationship with her? I mean, he's going to die like, in the next 10 years for sure. He's in his 80s. Like, so, but I've been sleeping great. I've been happier than I ever have in my life. So it depends. We can give people an ultimatum. And then I'm not estranging myself from him. He's estranging himself from me by not meeting me where I'm asking him to meet me.
Can you elaborate on the role of shame in shaping our lives and our relationships?
Yes. So shame is like the most detrimental, we'll call it a feeling. I'm not sure it's a feeling. It's kind of like the color black is a color, I guess, it like takes over though. So if everything's black, that's all you see, you don't see the other colors. That's how shame is. So shame is the most detrimental thing to humanity in my book. It is not, there's not one good thing about it. And if we live with shame, we will dissociate from reality. We will dissociate from ourselves. It will keep us from having that healthy relationship with ourselves. It will keep us from insight. It'll keep us from self awareness. It will block all of those things that are essential for our wholeness, becoming a whole integrated person. We will be disintegrated. We will be split. So some therapists talk about splitting. We will split. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm human, so I have anger just like every other human. But if I have shame, like severe shame around my anger, I will compartmentalize my anger. It'll be like over here in this little compartment. And when I interact with you, Jessica, I'll be like, oh, yeah, 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 Jessica. Oh, you want me to come help you again, even though I helped you last time and you never thanked me? Yeah. So I'll compartmentalize my anger over here because I'm ashamed of it. And then I'll be like super passive aggressive with you, and I'll put on this like person and you're like, "Oh, where's Bronwyn's backbone? She doesn't have a backbone." Yeah, it's compartmentalized over here. And so it's like I'm a Jekyll and Hyde kind of person, right? And that's what shame does to us. It makes us compartmentalize the things that we are ashamed of, and we are not even aware of it. And it is absolutely destructive. And we are not integrated because if I'm splitting, if I'm disintegrating, if I'm compartmentalizing a part of me, that's the opposite of integration, right?
Mm. Okay.
So I'll share with you what I did for my own shame because I lived with a lot of shame. It's kind of a really funny experience, actually, story. So I was thinking about shame kind of in the back of my mind as a therapist. And I went for a run one day. And I think when we're outside, sometimes we'll like get like, it's been my experience that I'll get like epiphanies when I'm outside. And so running, sometimes I'll get these epiphanies. My brain just kind of is like, whoa, wait, what? And so it was like one of those things. And so I'm running and it just kind of like came to my mind, like to the core of the front of my consciousness. Oh, all my shame came from when my dad shamed me growing up, and I have these specific experiences of our nightly dinner when he would shame me every night. And it like just was like clear as day. It was like a revelation. And I thought to myself, I was actually like, I think I was like stopped at a stoplight on my run. And I just stood there and I thought, oh, I need to give back that shame to my dad. And so I just imagined, young Bronwyn at age 10 and 11, sitting there getting belittled, getting ridiculed by her father. And I imagined her putting all this shame in a big cardboard box and then giving it to my dad and going, hey, this isn't mine. I'm just realizing this is not mine. It never was. So I'm going to return to owner. Here you go. It's yours. Do with it what you will, but it's not mine. My hands are free. And so I just did that exercise for myself. I kept running. And Jessica, like, that was several years ago. That was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I have been a different person since then. I have not felt shame since then. So, like, if you said to me, if you're my coworker and you like emailed me and you said, hey, Bronwyn, we need to talk about something. Prior to that exercise, I would have been like, oh my God, what have I done? I would have started feeling like preemptive shame, right? I would have just gone to a place of all bad. And that's what shame is. You go to all bad. It's like a black and white thinking of sorts. There's no like, we're all in the middle. You just go all the way to all bad. And that's what I would have done. That would have been my automatic reaction. And now, since that exercise, if you would send me the same email, I'd go, oh, yeah, I wonder what she needs to talk about. And that's just my new default because that shame isn't there sending me to a place of all bad anymore. It's so um it's so deceptive. Shame is deceptive and it plays tricks with us. It plays tricks with our mind and it makes us live in these black and whites of either I need to be perfect or I'm all bad. And
Mhm.
there's no healthy spectrum of like what real life is, which is in the middle. That's where humans live, is in that healthy middle. And I'm just happy to say that that's gone. But I do that exercise now with my clients as well.
I love that visualization. Okay, so my question is though, what if somebody feels the shame, but they don't know where it came from? Is there a way to alter the exercise so that they can do it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that takes like reflection. Um, I don't think it takes a lot of reflection, but kind of just spending time reflecting on our lives. Like, where did this shame come from? But one exercise I do, so I do these on my podcast. So I have a co-host. Her name's Katie. She's like my best friend. She's not a therapist. She's not, in this world. And so she lets me do a lot of like exercises on her for the actual podcast. And the goal is to help the listeners do it for themselves because they have been able to hear it and be walked through it. So what I do with Katie and what I do with my clients is I'll have them, let's say they just felt shame, a week ago because they went to like, an event and they felt the shame there. And I'll say, what did you feel in your body? Or what do you feel in your body now when you recount that time a week ago when you felt that shame? And they'll say, oh, I feel like a heaviness in my shoulders, or I feel like a knot in my gut, right? And so they'll feel these things in their bodies. And then I'll say, okay, I want you just to close your eyes and really just focus on that sensation in your body. And now just let your mind drift back to the earliest time you felt the same sensation. And usually they'll be like, oh, wow, I was 8 years old. And it was when my dad like humiliated me in front of the neighbor, so a memory will come to mind. And our
Mm.
bodies are so good at like remembering and just bringing us right back to those memories. So I would then say, okay, let's go to 8-year-old Jessica. Tell me what's happening. And then as we do that, her, I would have adult Jessica go to 8-year-old Jessica and help her put all that shame in the box and give it to the dad together.
Okay, I like that. But as far as exercises, I've heard of writing letters. If you need
Mhm.
forgiveness from, or you need to forgive someone, you're feeling anger and shame, but you want to forgive the person who passed it on to you. Would that be the right term?
Yeah. So as far as forgiveness goes, I have a very alternate view of forgiveness, what it is. So in our Western modern culture, we see it as just like a feeling. And I don't believe it's a feeling at all. I don't think our feelings have anything to do with whether we've forgiven or not. Forgiveness, in a practical term, is choosing not to be a monster back. So if my dad is, consistently a monster with me, I'm not allowing his hatred to infect me and make me hate him back and be a monster back to him. I am not going to respond in kind. And that is me living out forgiveness. So it doesn't mean I don't hold him accountable. It doesn't mean I don't have boundaries. It just means I'm not going to become a monster back. I'm not going to let his hatred infect me. Do I feel hatred when I think of him? Yeah, I do. But I choose what to do with that hatred. That hatred is there to inform me, to give me wisdom to say, so even though you miss him at times, Bronwyn, remember, feel that hatred. That it gives us vital information that he's a monster. And even though we miss him too, we're going to keep that boundary. That's how my hatred goes to work. But I don't foster the hatred. I don't feed it. I don't fuel it. I don't intentionally cultivate it into seeking some kind of vengeance or intentionally hurting him in a way that would respond in kind to how much he's hurt me. So that
Mm.
is lived forgiveness in my book.
Yes, that definitely is different, but it definitely makes sense. I mean, you don't want to feed the monster because then the monster grows.
Yes.
And yeah.
Yes. Then I'm a monster too.
Yeah. Okay, what are some ways that individuals can work to reverse their own trauma and heal? And I know we've already gone over a couple of exercises, but if they can't see a therapist like yourself, is there
Mhm.
anything else they can do, maybe daily or practices that you recommend that they implement?
Yeah. So I view trauma, you know, trauma isn't like what we would call, necessarily a traumatic act. It can be different for different people. Um, so, a child who is bullied, one child might be very traumatized by that. And another child who has a really good family life, like a mother or a father who attunes to him and like says, "Hey, Johnny, tell me what's going on at school. You seem really down." And then that parent listens and that parent says, "I don't blame you for being angry, Johnny. Like that's not okay that this kid is talking to you. That's wrong. What do you think you need to do? What can I help you? What should we do about this?" So a child who has that at home, someone who attunes to him, someone who validates his feelings of anger, um, that's not going to be traumatic for him. The child who doesn't have that at home, it will be traumatic for him. So it's not the actual lived experience that makes it traumatic. It's the lack of attunement that we have either as a child or as an adult. And then we suppress that anger because we don't have someone getting angry with us and for us. That's what we need is, and that's what a good therapist does. That's what a good friend does is they get angry with you and for you. They go, "Jessica, you have every right to be angry. I'd be angry too." Right. So now that anger isn't stuck inside you anymore. Just having someone validate it, you're not alone in your anger. What's shareable is bearable. So now that anger is literally released from your body out into the ether, and you're like, yeah, man, that isn't okay. And you know what? I'm not going to let that happen again. So now you're not naturally going to put those boundaries into place. So we can do that with a good therapist. We can have that from a good friend. Unfortunately, a lot of friends and therapists want to talk us out of our anger. They want to go, "Jessica, don't be angry. You got to forgive. You got to get over it. You don't want to be angry. Let's look at it from his point of view." Okay, that is not therapeutic. That's now I'm feeling angry at the person who hurt me, and I'm feeling betrayed by my friend who's betraying me, who's not attuning to me, who's not validating, right? So it's
Mhm.
kind of counterintuitive what needs to happen. Um, but we can also do that for ourselves. And that's really the most powerful thing we can do is give that attunement, that self attunement, that self validation. We need to do that for ourselves. It's not just can we do it? Because our friends are not going to be consistently exactly what we need. They're going to fail us at times. Either they're not going to be able to talk to us or they're going to make mistakes in how they relate to us. But we can be that consistent person for ourselves. We can say, "You know what? I'm feeling angry in my body right now. I'm feeling it in my shoulders. I'm feeling it in my gut. Man, I'm entitled to feel that because that was wrong. And I'm just gonna like write a fantasy letter to this person right now that I'm never going to send them, but I'm going to just write out how I felt in that moment and what I wished I could have said in that moment. And I'm going to do that for myself. And I'm going to know that my anger is valid. It's there for a really good reason. And I'm going to have boundaries with this person. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? That wasn't okay. And that can't happen again. And you need to win back my trust by either owning it or an apology or something of that nature. So I can do that for myself. And that's me validating myself, having that healthy self attunement for myself and that self nurture.
Oof, that just unlocked something in my brain. It just gave me an aha moment because validating emotions, everybody just wants to feel like they are validated. It goes back to people wanting to feel seen, heard, and understood. It's the
Yeah.
same concept. And yeah, but I never thought of feeling seen, heard, and understood being the same as having your feelings validated. But it is. So it's just another way of looking at it. And it just, yeah, it just makes you see it from a different angle. So yeah, that was wonderful. Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you would like to share?
We covered a lot, and I know it's a lot for people to take in all at once, but um, again, I do cover all this in my podcast, and my co-host Katie kind of helped slow me down, so that's good. I can be pretty intense. Um, so yeah, I would just encourage people who are inspired and want to hear more to visit my podcast and just hear more in depth about all of these things. And that my podcast is Angry at the Right Things.
Okay, great. And then that will be in the show notes, of course. And I have one final question that I ask all the guests at the end, which is what is your number one health tip? Whether that's mindset, diet, and nutrition, physical, emotional, just the one piece of advice you want everyone to know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say life is too short to betray yourself.
Yeah,
And that's not a selfish act, actually. Me being more alive makes my relationship with my spouse, my relationship with my child, my relationship with everyone in my life, it makes it better. So there's nothing selfish about choosing to be true to myself.
that was a lesson I had to learn myself. Tough one.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Bronwyn. This has been a pleasure. Thank you for sharing so much value. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please make sure to subscribe and come back next week for another amazing conversation. And also be sure to check out the show notes to make sure you can go to Brown's podcast to hear more.
Thank you, Jessica.